This excerpt is from The Gilded Age by Mark Twain, 1873. Our essential question is, to what extent is it possible for people to control or change their socioeconomic standing in American society? Context. This is an excerpt from Chapter 26 of The Gilded Age, A Tale of Today, a novel by Mark Twain and Charles Dudley Warner, first published in 1873. Fun fact, the authors were neighbors who lived in Hartford, Connecticut when writing this piece. The novel satirizes greed and political corruption in a post-Civil War America. The main characters are two men who work as engineers, assessing the value of land for possible mining. The subject of this chapter is Ruth Bolton, the love interest of one of the men, who lives in the countryside outside of Philadelphia with her parents, the Boltons, who own land that is rich in coal deposits, a fact that her suitor, one of the young engineers, will later discover. It was a most unreasonable feeling. No home could be pleasanter than Ruth Bolton's. The house, a little out of the city, was one of those elegant country residences which so much charm visitors to the suburbs of Philadelphia. A modern dwelling and luxurious in everything that wealth could suggest for comfort, it stood in the midst of exquisitely kept lawns with groups of trees, parterres of flowers massed in colors, with greenhouse, grapery, and garden on one side. The garden sloped away in undulations to a shallow brook that ran over a pebbly bottom and sang under forest trees. The country about was the perfection of cultivated landscape, dotted with cottages and stately mansions of Revolutionary date, and sweet as an English countryside, whether seen in the soft bloom of May or in the mellow ripeness of late October. It needed only the peace of mind within to make it a paradise. One riding by on the old Germantown road and seeing a young girl swinging in the hammock on the piazza, and intent upon some volume of old poetry or the latest novel, would no doubt have envied a life so idyllic. Ruth's father could not have imagined that the young girl was reading a volume of reports of clinics and longing to be elsewhere. Ruth could not have been more disconcerted if all the wealth about her had been as unsubstantial as a dream. Perhaps she so thought it. "I feel," she once said to her father, "as if I were living in a house of cards." "And thee would like to turn it into a hospital?" "No, but tell me, father," continued Ruth, not to be put off, "is thee still going on with that Bigler and those other men who come here and entice thee?" Mr. Bolton smiled as men do when they talk with women about business, quote unquote. "Such men have their uses, Ruth. They keep the world active, and I owe a great many of my best operations to such men. Who knows, Ruth? But this new land purchase, which I confess I yielded a little too much to in Bigler in, may not turn out a fortune for thee and for the rest of the children?" "Ah, father, thee sees everything in a rose-colored light. I do believe thee wouldn't have so readily allowed me to begin the study of medicine if it hadn't had the novelty of an experiment to thee. And is thee satisfied with it?" "If thee means if I'd had enough of it, no. I just began to see what I can do in it, and what a noble profession it is for a woman. Would thee have me sit here like a bird on a bough and wait for somebody to come in and put me in a cage?" Mr. Bolton was not sorry to divert the talk from his own affairs, and he did not think it worthwhile to tell his family of a performance that very day, which was entirely characteristic of him. Ruth might well say that she felt as if she were living in a house of cards, although the Bolton household had no idea of the number of perils that hovered over them, any more than thousands of families in America have the business risks and contingencies upon which their prosperity and luxury hang. A sudden call upon Mr. Bolton for a large sum of money, which must be forthcoming at once, had found him in the midst of a dozen ventures, from no one of which a dollar could be realized. It was in vain that he applied to his business acquaintances and friends. It was a period of sudden panic and no money. 100,000, Mr. Bolton, said Plumley. Good God, you should ask me for 10. I shouldn't know where to get it. And yet, that day, Mr. Small, Pennybacker, Bigler, and Small, came to Mr. Bolton with a piteous story of ruin in a coal operation. If he could not raise $10,000, only 10, and he was sure of a fortune. Without it, he was a beggar. Mr. Bolton had already Small's notes for a large amount in his safe labeled doubtful, quote unquote. He had helped him again and again, and always with the same result. But Mr. Small spoke with a faltering voice of his family, his daughter in school, his wife ignorant of his calamity, and drew such a picture of their agony that Mr. Bolton put by his own more pressing necessity and devoted the day to scraping together, here and there, $10,000 for this brazen beggar who had never kept a promise to him nor paid a debt. Beautiful credit, the foundation of modern society. Who shall say that this is not the golden age of mutual trust, of unlimited reliance upon human promises? That is the peculiar condition of society which enables a whole nation to instantly recognize point and meaning in the familiar newspaper anecdote, which puts into the mouth of a distinguished speculator in mines and lands this remark: it wasn't worth a cent 2 years ago, and now I owe $2 million.